What is up, everyone? I'm Jeff Lund, and this is the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. Talking with Derek Meister today. He's the school psychologist for Ketchikan Gateway Borough School District. Great dude. Moved up here a couple years ago, did some time as a commercial fisherman, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about wellness. We're going to talk about mindfulness and how to get through the wet Alaskan or Southeast Alaska winters. What he does to make sure that he is mentally prepared and ready to do the best he can at his job. We're going to talk about the benefits of living in a small community. We're going to talk about mentorship, and we're going to talk about how we both got into teaching and dealing with kids and how it's been fulfilling and the benefits of that. That is coming up in episode 86 of the Mediocre Alaskan Podcast. Make sure you check out the mediocrealaskan.com for content, and here we go with Derek.
How long did you go, did you move up here?
It'll be 7 years come the end of August this year.
So what was your fishing experience when you got up here? We were just talking about the halibut anchor stuff and stuff you see for the first time. What was your experience?
Well, I grew up in Minnesota, and so lots of lakes and river fishing. I'm used to catching things that fit in the palm of your hand, like sunfish and crappies.
Yeah.
You get lucky, you end up with a walleye. The biggest fish I'd ever caught in my life was a 36-pound catfish, that's a good-sized catfish.
Was it noodling?
It wasn't noodling. It could have. I vague memories of it. I was pretty young. There's a picture of me standing next to my dad in the water. I must have been 8 years old or something. But the fish looked as big as me. But so fishing-wise, I'd never really done any ocean. I don't think I'd ever seen an ocean before I moved up here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens. You don't have those in Minnesota.
Yeah.
I moved up when I was 5, and I was kind of at the mercy of what my parents wanted to do because they're the older ones, and I'm 5 years old. And so I didn't hunt much growing up because Dad, was used to getting whitetail in Colorado and Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you're not going to come up here and look at the blacktail at the bottom of a clear cut and you have to pack that thing out. Man, this thing is tiny compared to what I'm used to. And so Dad was like, man, this isn't really worth the trouble. So I didn't really have hunting, but we fished a lot. And the first ocean memories were going out and the inboard blowing up. And so 6-hour little putt back in. I'm like, man, ocean fishing's terrible. It's boring. You don't catch anything. And the engine's going to blow up. So, So yeah, I feel like I grew up here, but I feel like I'm new in a lot of ways because I'm trying to figure that stuff out. So.
Right. Where did you come from?
Colorado.
Colorado, okay.
I was there until I was 5, and then I've been here, had a stop off in Arizona for college, and then 10 years in California teaching.
Cool.
But, so what are some of the things that you've jumped in and done the last 7 years? What's the thing that you've thought has been the most invigorating, best part of living in Ketchikan?
Oh, man. Well, I figured that I should get my Alaska card punched, and I thought a good way to do that was to try commercial fishing.
Oh, jumped right in.
Oh! Yeah, I've got marks to prove it, in addition to those punches on my Alaska card. But I actually met a friend who I had no idea had any connection to the industry. His name's Timmy Curl. You know who that is?
Heard the name.
Yeah, Curl is a local name. I think most of his family is actually attorneys. Lawyers, but he is a captain of a boat, and at the end of the 2013 summer, near the end, last week of July, first week of August or something, he told me that he had one of his crew got injured, hurt their back, and he's like, "You want to go out and make some money?" And I was like, "Timmy, I don't even know what you do, man. What are we talking about here?" And he's like, "Fishing. I'm talking about fishing." And he's like, "It's a huge year," and it was. I don't know if you were aware of the 2013 salmon fishing season.
Yeah, it
was historic.
It was the first year I was back. Yeah.
It was the biggest salmon fishing year they've had around here in 100 years. I didn't know that at the time. So he brought me out on the Johnny B, which is a 1929 wooden seiner, skinny, really old equipment, really rocks back and forth. I got some gear and my first pair of extra toughs. So this is after being in town for about almost exactly 1 year. And I go out on the ricketiest old seiner in the fleet, and the first load of salmon we pulled on deck was 30,000 pounds.
Jeez.
And I'm Minnesota guy, never seen anything like it. I'm losing my mind. I'm like, whoa,
Oh, yeah,
they're up to my hips, flopping around, just deck loaded. Everyone on the boat's screaming Vegas, Vegas, and I'm like, what? They're like, dude, you just made $2,000 right now. And I'm like, what? So that summer, it was kind of good and bad luck. It was good luck that I ended up on a boat in that season to see what good fishing could be like, and I made like 20 grand in like 6 openers. It was ridiculous.
Nice.
The deckhands that were on deck making like a 7% cruise share made like 80 grand that summer.
Jeez.
I know. So the bad part was I got a taste of what good fishing could be like. So then I went back for a whole season the next summer, and it was miserable. It was one of the worst fishing seasons.
Yeah.
Made like 15 grand after the whole summer was said and done, and just got worked. And that was enlightening though, because I thought I knew what hard work was. I did not.
Yeah. I've never done the commercial fishing thing. I just always, I had some buddies growing up that had done it, and you're just, around it on Prince of Wales, Craig, but I just didn't ever think that I was either, for some reason, it didn't feel like my thing.
Yeah.
I wasn't curious enough about it. I didn't feel either that I could make it or that I wanted to test myself in that realm, and I wasn't around during a lot of the summers, so... just the hours. I like being out. I like having some sleep. I like being on my own terms. And I think, again, growing up and just having the misery of those early boat trips kind of soured me on the ocean for a little bit. So to do that, and what if there are no fish, and just it's chaos. It's uncertain. So, what are some of the details of what were the days like?
That was crazy, man. You mentioned, like the hours. Like I learned that I am the kind of person that loves fishing, but I love to come home when I'm done. I love a hot shower. I like to be able to sleep. I mean, sleep was the most valuable thing to me on the boat. And in the dead of the summertime, the peak of the season, we were working like probably 18 to 20-hour days, getting like a 4-hour nap sometimes, 3-hour nap some days, 2-hour nap before you had to get up before the sun was even up again, because it comes up really early in the summer, 2 or 3 in the morning. You're out there setting the deck. I mean, it is just grueling, and like you can't eat enough food to keep up with the calories you're burning. So my wife was really pleased. We weren't married at the time, but we were dating. I'd come home and
chiseled.
I was too. I was the shape of my life,
yeah.
but the first thing I wanted to do when I got home was have a good cry and then eat like a cheeseburger. Just
any sort of calories.
So it was wild that way. And actually, so I did that for a full summer and actually said never again. Next summer came around and I forgot about the pain and remembered the dollar signs.
Yeah.
So I tried gill netting. Do you know Eric Besnick? Heard of him at all? He's a local guy. I went out and tried gill netting. That's a smaller operation, considerably less grueling, but still pretty brutal. And still, you don't get to come home when you want to come home. And I liked it a little better, but I think the only way I would ever end up out fishing again is like if me and wifey had our own boat and could just do it at our leisure. Like it wasn't we had to make enough money to survive on it. That was like a supplementary thing. But I got my fill, and I decided to lean on my degrees and do something,
long-term strategy there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun to just hear the stories, but you hear the best part, and I've always loved having the summers off. I like to be able to do things on my own accord, and so if it is a nice day, I know that without a doubt I can enjoy it because I have nothing else going on. So having a summer job would, you could have more toys maybe, but I've always, it's just kind of what I've done. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's what I did.
Yeah, and for me, like I went back to school again after I had been here for 5 years as a school counselor to become a school psychologist, which is what I do now. And there's just, I feel like I have too much debt to just hang out in the summertime, so I have always been looking for summer work. And I did the tourist thing the last couple of years, doing kayak tours. Yeah. Much more my speed.
More cheeseburgers.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was a super fun gig, but also feeling a little bit over it. But I feel like that's another, got my Alaska card punched, worked in the tourism industry, another big industry here.
So you say grueling in the context of fishing.
Yeah.
Now we kind of use that as a transition to working at the schools. I was, my first couple years of teaching it was stressful in that, because I didn't want to be a teacher growing up. I kind of fell into teaching, which I really enjoyed it. And then you realize the importance of these years for these kids. And what can I say to these kids so they don't have to find out by themselves what rock bottom looks like, or how can I prevent them from these? And it was so difficult. Every single kid, you can't not turn this in. It has to happen.
Yeah.
And it's,
Yep.
and I don't know if it was after a couple of years you realize that you can, save them all, and it's so tough to trust in that you're going to try to be there for them. You're going to try to say the right words, but know that later on it might make sense to them.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about the grueling nature of being a counselor and being like that aspect. What's the mindset there?
That's another interesting story. I'll try to make the preface to it brief, but there's an important preface. I also, growing up, assumed just this was the level of self-awareness and self-knowledge that I had at the time. I thought that I would never want to work with kids.
Yeah.
In fact, my rationale was that I know what I was like. I know how I treated adults.
And I wasn't even bad.
Oh,
comparatively, I did some stupid stuff. But,
oh man, I was, and most of the time I wasn't that bad of a kid. Sometimes I play up that part just because I think it's funny. But I did do some bonehead things. I gave people a hard time that didn't deserve it.
Yeah.
I was awful a lot, and I was like, I would just never want to be on the receiving end of that, So here's my karma, right? Now I'm in this role. But
I think it's important. You can relate to certain things. As you see things happening,
totally.
like, hey, I know what you're doing there. And it's not that... It just helps with how you manage it and how you deal with it.
Yep.
Right? So I was never a kid who was... I was terrified of B's and C's.
Mm-hmm.
I got 1 B in high school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the grade thing, I'm not really sure. But like the attention thing, and like those sort of things, the social dynamics. And, I gave people a hard time that I should not have given a hard time. And some people will say, well, it's just part of high school. It doesn't have to be, And so now on the other end of that being like, hey, kids, let's do that. But.
Yep, and I think, I had some mentor or instructor figure at some point say something to me about, we don't always find ourselves in these roles because we had really good examples.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we find ourselves in these roles because we believe that it could be better, or maybe we didn't have good role models or good examples all the time. Because I have teachers that to this day I'm like, wow, they may have actually saved my life. Like I think about some of the things that they did or said or went out of their way to see me as an individual, to really make a connection, and that's something that I've carried with me in my professional roles in this capacity. I think is just vitally important. It's just you connect, because like you said, it doesn't have to be that way, and there's going to be people that you just, despite your best efforts, can't connect with, and that's just how it is. But the fact that you tried, that by itself might be something that they remember down the road, like, I was a shit, and this person hung in there with me. They wouldn't give up on me. That's incredible.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
But, going back to, I had took a job in the summer during college at an after-school rec program. And it was brutal. Had some hard learning lessons there, but I realized I loved it. I loved being around kids. I loved playing with kids, and playing is what I like to do in my life. It was an easy transition. It was like, this whole adult thing. I don't have to lose that part of myself, which I was deathly afraid of when I was younger. But eventually I found myself studying psychology, and I worked at a residential treatment facility for kids back in Minnesota for 3 years, working with the oldest boys, and that was those are some of the most difficult experiences I've had in my life to date. But again, also some of the most valuable tools that I have. And then I was a day treatment program coordinator with the same agency for a couple of years and got a lot of great skill there, but felt like I need to do more for more kids. I need to find a way to cast a broader net. So I went back to school to be a school counselor, and I was in Minnesota at that time still. And then once we got done, everyone in my cohort, it was like a feeding frenzy, all applying for the same a handful of jobs in the metropolitan, the Twin Cities area that were super competitive. And I was kind of like, oh man, I'm like, I've been living in Minnesota my whole life, never had really an adventure. I wasn't married, didn't have any kids, didn't have like a house payment or anything. So I was like, I'm going for it. And I just looked for jobs as far out as I could in Alaska. Ketchikan in particular showed up, and I was like, I've never even heard that word. So I was on the internet Googling it. I applied and got a hold of Alonzo, who was the principal at the time for his first year. Now he's our curriculum director. And we interviewed for a couple hours on the phone. Within a couple weeks, I was on like a 4-day road trip up to Alaska. Packed my 98 Subaru as full as it could go. And one of my buddies, thankfully, was like, dude, I know this is like your quest, but he's like, if you want some help driving, he's like, I got nothing going on for like the next month. And I was like, come on in, we're going to Alaska.
That's sweet.
Yeah, it was crazy. And honestly, ever since I got here, it's been like one just beautiful, like meaningful coincidence after another. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be right now. Yeah, it's cool.
The great thing about it is it's a good place to come back to. If you're from here, you go out, you see the world, you're like, this is what I expected. There's some good parts for sure, but really, you know, the brochure life of Ketchikan is better than the brochure life somewhere else. It's a great place to come back to. Yeah. Great place to move as well.
Yeah.
But do you see the dynamic? You're down south, you graduate high school, do whatever. If there's no job in that town, there's some of that, I don't know how to term it, but you know, you don't have a whole lot of extra education. There's a lot of other jobs, employment opportunities down the road, different town. You can commute as far as you can. There's a lot more out there.
Yeah.
Ketchikan obviously doesn't have that. You can drive 15 miles north, 15 miles south, and that's it. What do you think that provides as far as a unique challenge, where Ketchikan is great, unbelievably supportive, great people, solid economy, all the mentors you could ask for. You know, a rich native culture, not a paved over sort of culture. It's vibrant, so there doesn't have to be a, well, my people aren't really represented here, strong Filipino community. What are some of the drawbacks and some of the difficulties that come from the reality of being on an island and the kids as you're trying to get them to be adult ready that you've seen?
Hey, there's a little bit to unpack, I guess, in that question for me, and also, you know, to look at it from the kid perspective too. But for me, you know, obviously just limited options has been a thing. You know, you get tired of, you know, if you want to, you just feeling lazy, you don't want to cook your own meal, like, you know, where do you go? I mean, you've got a handful of places, and we've got some really good restaurants, you know, but there's a couple of them, and then the rest is just pretty standard, pretty basic kind of stuff. So that's something. I hate to admit it, but, you know, the material part of me that needs new pants that I can't find on the island, you know, I have to go online and roll the dice, or it's whenever you get your next trip down to Seattle to go shopping. Family, too, you know, like my family's all back in Minnesota, and they're not, you know, I'd say they're lower middle class kind of in general, so getting up to Alaska is expensive and not totally reasonable within a budget. My wife's family is from Washington, which is closer, but again, you know, you can't just jump in the car and go. You're taking a ferry to the airport and flying down, and if the weather's good enough. I think the weather is something by itself too that you really have to acclimate to. Alonzo asked me, you know, point blank on the phone, what do you know about Ketchikan? He's like, do you know how much it rains here? I'm like, I'm from Minnesota. We do -50 below winters sometimes with 8 feet of snow, but the little bit more darkness that Ketchikan gets and the sheer amount of wind and rain was shocking to
Yeah.
me. You can read on paper that you get 12 to 15 feet of rain a year, but living in it, this is intense.
There's a big difference between it being negative 30, but you can see the sun.
Yeah.
And it's warmer, it's 38, 39, but rainy, and there's a big difference there.
There's a gloom there, and I'll tell you what, in the winter times, I felt that it was energy level was down, harder to get up in the morning. I don't think I experienced full on like seasonal affective depression or anything like that, but it was noticeable, and we're only not too many latitude lines higher than Minnesota is on the globe, but yeah, you feel it. So I think those are some of the challenges, and for kids, what really made the perception kids have, or at least a lot of kids, I think, I'd say probably better than half kids have this kind of perception that they're coming up through high school and all they want to do is get the heck out of Ketchikan.
Yeah.
Then they want to kiss the rock goodbye forever. I was assistant coaching on the high school soccer team for, how long did I do that for? A couple of years? And I'd never played soccer. I barely knew the rules, but there was someone who was looking for an assistant coach, and I was like, I'm good with kids. They're like, you got a job. Let's do it,
Managing,
Good enough.
Absolutely.
You'll figure the game out.
Yeah.
And it was great, but the conversations I had with those kids a lot of the time centered around what are you going to do when you graduate, and they're like, I'm getting the heck out of here. So many of those kids come back and they have that story about, there's advantages, like we talked about, material advantages, options for food, options for jobs. You have access to a larger demographic of people, and there's different experiences you can have in other places, which are all valuable and cool and fine. But there's nothing quite like a small town, In Ketchikan, I don't know that I know too many different small towns as intimately as I know Ketchikan, but if they're anything like this, you can't get that in a big city.
No.
You can't get that in a larger population, and so many kids come back and they say they just couldn't deal with that large city because people feel so disconnected or the attitudes are funky.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, leaving, there's so many more people, so it seems amazing that you'd feel more alone.
Yeah.
But that just, if the right circles don't there's a couple circles, it seems like, rather than so many circles that you're not ever a part of one. So
Right.
you're going to see people all everywhere you go. You're going to see, and that's fine. It's one of the adjustments here was how many students called adults by their first name since they'd known them as like an honorary uncle since they were 2 or 3 or 4.
Right.
And so that was kind of I thought, before I said, no, you will call him Mr. or whatever. I was like, that's interesting. Like that, okay. So, but at the same time, still being respectful, not thinking that they have any sort of inside track or advantage because, they've known each other forever. It's still, you can maintain that student teacher difference and respect.
Yeah.
But, if a kid calls Rick,
Yeah.
and it's all right, it's fine. So,
Yeah, for sure. There's been a couple times where a kid, especially at the elementary level, maybe just doesn't know any better, didn't think about it. Like, I had a couple different situations. One of them's like a kid just calls me Derek. I'm not offended by someone calling me what my real name is. There's this expectation that it's got to be Mr. and this respect of the authoritative boundary that's there, and I think that's important for a lot of reasons too, but I'm Mr. Derek to every kid I've ever worked with, and if they just call me Derek, not a big deal, but I've had someone else come up and, you need to call him, and I was like, actually, I'm okay with it, I'm not trying to, have a disagreement in front of the student with you here right now, but it's okay with me. And then I've had kids go, hey, Derek, and then they have this like aghast look on their face, like they just hurt me, like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, I've been called worse things than my first name before. Trust me, it's okay.
Well, realizing that, I think, is important. I think that's the connection that you make as a psychologist, counselor, teacher, anybody, mentor.
Yeah.
And even if it's like a hunting mentor type,
Yeah.
and that's one of the nice things that they have. So many kids have so many assets going through. They have the potential to have them here because you have real activities such as fishing, hiking, outdoorsing. I have a lot of kids who say, can we go fly fishing? So once you graduate.
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's, you have programs that are down south, but there's still kind of the attitude. I know when I started teaching, it was, don't live where you teach or live across town. That way you can have the separation where I kind of like the small town feel where there isn't necessarily that separation. So, you are going to see kids that are going to be asking you to buy raffle tickets for what you're not going to win at the A&P,
Yeah.
you know, and just being part of the community, having it so close, and on, you know, Monday after fishing season, or, you know, hey, Mr. Lund, you get a steelhead, or you know, kids say, Mr. Lund, this buck I shot. I'm like, I think it's just it makes it a really good place to grow up from that perspective. But there's some ugly things that go on too. So how do you kind of cope with that, help the kids out, and then also keeping yourself mentally prepared? Because the better condition you show up to work, the better you can be for the people that need you. So,
Amen.
What have you seen? How do you function? How do you decompress?
Well, I really do believe that there is some kind of mostly, if not entirely, innate predisposition to working in education or helping fields. And what I mean is that I remember working at, this is a super great example of this, when I was working at the residential treatment facility. Intense, right? Like we had the most severely behaviorally, emotionally, and I guess academically, developmentally challenged kids in the Midwest. I was working at this facility that was really kind of cutting edge and kind of the go-to. Big wait list to get kids in there, but these kids had major problems to the point that I haven't really even seen a kid in our district that could hold a candle to some of the worst kids that I've seen come through there, which really prepared me well. But in terms of like coping with it, I got there, I realized that I loved connecting with the kids. There were challenges. It tried me. I almost left the job at one point because we had a rash of really large, very strong, very violent, aggressive kids that we would have to restrain fairly regularly, and that's exhausting, and that's a lot for anyone to cope with over time. But in a more general sense, like I felt like I was able to leave it at work, and I don't know exactly, like if you ask me how do I leave things at work, I don't know. I mean, there's times where I've been up all night, not able to sleep, but that's rare for me. Like I have the ability to compartmentalize my life in ways that are healthy, you know, while still being able to have the continuity of my life. But it's like, that's work, and I can leave that there. And I don't know where I might have learned that. But then, so the example is like the person who shows up for that kind of job and is there for like a week, and they're like, nope. You know, like Ketchikan almost does that. You know, people come here and they're either like, yes, or they're like, get me out of here, you know. So I think there is something to that, and I can't really take a whole lot of credit if it is something that's genetic or something, you know, that I just have that kind of personality type. But I couldn't agree more with what you said about, you know, the extent to which you take care of yourself is the extent to which you'll be helpful to other people and to be helpful to students. So I play a lot. I laugh constantly at work and outside of work. Breathing exercises and mindfulness meditation that you and I have spoken about a little bit are really, really important practices for me. I do a fair amount of yoga and like deliberate exercise, but I mean, Ketchikan's kind of place too where you don't actually have to go to a gym to get a workout.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Go outside and just start walking. Eventually, you'll be sweating. You know, like you're going to go up a mountain at some point. Looking for new experiences is really refreshing and invigorating to me, like jumping in the ocean for fun and connecting with new people. Like there's just, like you said, there's no limit to the amount of mentors and people you can find in this island to teach you new things or to help you improve your skills with things. And then having a healthy cry when it builds up, you know.
Healthy cheeseburger.
Right? Yeah, healthy. Right. Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Yeah.
You know, those things are really important, and I think that's a lot of the main things. You know, quality time with my wife and that kind of thing is huge.
What would you recommend for local, adult, kid, anybody, someone who, it doesn't even have to be in Ketchikan either, as far as the mindfulness, what are some things that they could do? Maybe in like rural setting and urban setting, like Ketchikan, and then maybe something, if someone's listening down south, like what can you, your 5-cent advice, what the college told you?
I would say, as far as mindfulness goes, it's a really nice tool to have in so many different situations. It could be something you use by itself as sort of an independent activity, as a standalone thing, or it could be something that you kind of incorporate into your style of interacting with people. It can be something you use as a coping strategy for stressful situations, but it's really just about breathing. And in that way, if you're respirating, you can take advantage of an opportunity to practice mindfulness in a formal or informal sense. So the formal sense would be, and this would be, advice for people rural or urban or any kind of setting, is you can stop what you're doing and you can take 30 seconds. You could take 10 seconds. You could take 5 minutes. You could take whatever amount of time is available to you, and you always have it. It's just a question of whether you're going to carve it out for that particular thing, because it does require a degree of discipline, but you can stop and you can recognize your breathing. So you can start paying attention to it, right? It's happening all the time. It's one of those things that's kind of an automatic function of your physiological body, but also something you can control. And so you can just tap into it and notice the breath as it's coming into your body. Where do you feel that happening? Do you feel it like in your mouth, in your throat, in your nose, in your chest, in your belly? Just notice it coming in, then notice it flowing back out, and kind of attend to the rhythm. Just be there with that. And really the idea with mindfulness in that particular exercise is that our brains are designed to think. Our brains are designed to solve problems. They have memory capacities, so sometimes we get stuck thinking about things in the past that aren't even happening right now that could be causing stress. We anticipate the future as a way to protect ourselves, so sometimes we freak out future tripping, thinking about things that aren't even happening. When you focus on your breathing, and it could be anything, but that's just a really accessible thing, it brings you into the moment of your existence.
Yeah.
And right now, right here and right now, pretty much no matter what's going on, things are okay. Especially if that's all you allow yourself to try to attend to. And that's where the practice is, because if you stop and try it for a minute, see how long you can track your breath in and out for, just concentrating on it. At some time, very quickly after you begin, you will become distracted by a thought, or a memory, or a fantasy, or your senses. I'm hearing faucets running in the other room, there's visualization happening on my computer screen in here. My hands feel a little bit cold, there's all this sensory input that is drawing our attention. But the part of your brain that you're exercising with mindfulness by focusing on that one thing for as long as you can is exactly that part of your brain that's responsible for paying attention. And so if you practice that enough, it strengthens those abilities to be aware, to perceive, to be present. And to me, that's one of the greatest strengths I have as an individual, is to be present with my interactions with kids, with my interactions with adults, with my wife, with my environment. I roll ankles so much less often since I've practiced this, just little things. And you can practice it not just by sitting and focusing on your breath, but doing anything. If I reach for my water bottle, I could make that a mindfulness activity about thinking, okay, which muscles are being activated to be able to grab this? How far do I need to reach my hand? What kind of firmness do I need to clutch the bottle with? Oh, I'm going to need another hand to take the top off. There's just so much we take for granted that you can strengthen those abilities. But for me, the other big side effect that happens is that I don't have to worry about one day thinking that I've missed my life, laying on my deathbed going, man, I wish I would have smelled the roses a little bit more. There's a lot to those kinds of cliche sayings that, this is your life happening right here, right now, and that's always true until it stops. And there's a richness and a fullness in the experience of looking at your life that way, because it's an attitude. You can choose to look at it that way, or you can blow it off. I've got these goals, I got these things I have to accomplish, I'm living out here in the future, out in front of me at all times. Or I can have a balance of remembering what I need to remember, of having my goals in the future, but also remembering to be alive in that moment whenever I do remember to think that way.
Good stuff. Love it.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts? And speaking of the right here, right now, it's almost it's late on Friday. It's almost weekend time. So any closing thoughts or anything?
other than just remember to be alive while you're alive, because it doesn't last forever. Yeah.
Good. Any like resources that people might want to know about? Phone numbers, emails, things like that they can get a hold of if they're in Ketchikan.
Sure.
For help or anything?
Yeah, I mean, if people are curious, they wanted to chat with me, I mean, people are welcome to send me an email. My personal email is just DerekJames10, DerekJames10 @gmail.com. But there's a litany of resources on the internet. There's obviously a range of quality of those resources in regard to mindfulness, but if you come across the name John Kabat-Zinn, he's a medical doctor who kind of had a transformation in his thinking back in the 60s and has done a lot of research into mindfulness-based practices, and he's written prolifically on the subject. Anything by him is going to be a good resource, so that's a good place to start. He wrote a book called Full Catastrophe Living. That's a great introduction to the whole mindfulness thing, and he actually developed the mindfulness-based stress reduction clinic and technique, and he has an actual facility, I think it's in Massachusetts, where he treats people. And just a little statistical piece of information, he has as strong of positive outcomes and results through mindfulness-based reductions to treat pain as pharmaceutical medication. And it's been life-changing for a number of people. So it's
we could do a whole separate podcast on books and medicine. I was just talking with some, was it adults or was it kids? I don't know, about the medication and about what you can do as far as, I think it was Sadie at Green Bean. How much control we have over our healing and our help and our presence right now, but we're increasingly looking for a pill that treats symptoms, not the cause in the first place. And then what activities can you do to feel and rejuvenate your brain, which is kind of where a lot of stuff, like fix your soul, fix your brain, go from there.
And a lot of this stuff is old, ancient kinds of based on wisdom traditions, that have their roots in spirituality and religion for some of it, but it's just old wisdom, that we've gotten so far away from that. And you're right, it's kind of the fast food culture. We want a solution, we want it now. A pill is a lot more effective than me maybe starting an exercise regimen and feeling better after a couple weeks. Yeah, that's a can of worms for sure.
Yeah, it's nice to have some of the medical advancements are incredible and have been amazing for people of all backgrounds, without question.
Yep.
But if you can do everything you can to not be at the mercy of that, then try to explore some of that. But, so that'll be the next one, man. We'll definitely have to get on again, get some books, and we'll quote some things.
Killer.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.